she bore 14 children with her own brother, the purest woman from the Kentucky forests. What would you do upon discovering your family conceals secrets so profound they could shake society's very foundations? The Appalachian Mountains hold stories seldom reaching our ears, lost between isolated valleys and communities living on time's fringes. Today, I unveil a case buried in shadow for nearly 2 centuries. Martha Sullivan was no mere countrywoman. Within her womb, she carried the weight of a family tradition defying both nature's laws and society's. What you learn in the coming minutes may forever alter your view on family loyalty's limits and the price paid by those born of pure blood. If historical investigations revealing humanity's darkest truths captivate you, be sure to subscribe to the channel now. Prepare for a story rarely told outside close academic circles. A narrative showing how isolation and twisted beliefs can forge generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy. Between Kentucky's deep valleys and green hills, where sunlight rarely pierces the dense treetops, only stacked stones and rotting boards remain. These are the silent traces of the Sullivan property, founded in 1798, a place locals avoid to this day. The wind whispering through ancient oaks seems to carry echoes, as if the earth itself remembers children born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds. Gazing upon these ruins, understand we see more than a house's remains. We face the physical testament to a terrible philosophy, the belief that family blood's purity must be preserved at any cost. The farmland, distant from the thunder often punishing these mountains, held the muffled cries of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts, while family patriarch Ebenezer Sullivan proudly declared, "Our blood will remain pure as gold, untouched by outsiders." Dark clouds gather once more over the ruins, an omen of what this story will reveal. To follow more cases like this, ones that stir society and uncover hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you miss no investigation. The Sullivan property spanned roughly 320 rugged acres in Harlan County, Kentucky. A 2-story, 8-room wooden house stood at its center, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired hands. A rigid internal hierarchy governed the family. Ebenezer at the peak, followed by his sons, then Sullivan-born women, and finally temporary workers who never stayed more than a season. Each day began at 4 a.m. with an iron bell echoing through the valley, calling all to their duties. Women spent 16 hours daily preparing food, weaving clothes, and tending the young, while men handled hunting, farming, and occasional trade with distant villages. Control was maintained through constant surveillance. Strategically placed windows allowed Ebenezer to observe every movement on the property. The family chapel, built from dark oak, hosted not only prayers but meetings deciding marriages between cousins and close kin. Creaking floorboards announced the patriarch's arrival, bringing absolute silence. When snow isolated the property for months, births occurred in the main house's basement, away from outside eyes. It was during the particularly harsh winter of 1823 that Martha Sullivan entered the world, her penetrating blue eyes seeming to hold knowledge far beyond her years. This was the child who, unknowingly, carried the family lineage's future in her womb. Martha Sullivan grew displaying extraordinary skills that set her apart. By 9, she knew the medicinal properties of 73 different plants from the surrounding woods. Her ability to memorize biblical texts impressed even the itinerant pastor visiting yearly. While other family girls remained confined to the property, Martha received special permission from her father to accompany men on occasional trading trips to Cumberland, 12 miles away. During these rare glimpses of the outside world, she carefully observed social interactions, absorbing information about medicine, law, and world news, while never revealing details of her own family. Within the Sullivan community, Martha held a privileged position. She was the only woman allowed to attend family meetings where important matters were discussed. Surrounding inhabitants sought her healing skills, letting her cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. "The girl has the gift of healing hands and a language that speaks without words," the people said, trusting her while fearing the rest of her family. On full moon nights, Martha could be seen gathering specific herbs that bloom only in that light, moving like a shadow among the trees, carrying knowledge passed down by generations of Sullivan women. The paradox lay precisely here. The more valuable she became to the outside community, the more indispensable she was to the family's internal plans, especially to her brother Jeremiah, just 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they matured. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth, if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The horrors on the Sullivan property manifested gradually, like shadows lengthening at dusk. First came whispers about cousin Robert, born in 1825 with 6 fingers on each hand, unable to make sounds beyond primitive grunts, kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 of a union between uncle and niece, her skin bluish with eyes so distant they seemed unable to focus together. In 1829, Frederick was born to first-degree cousins. At 3 he still could not hold up his head, dying in a violent seizure before turning 5. With each problematic birth, Martha watched the adults' reactions, denial, rationalization, and finally supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriage. When the daughter of cousins Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, Martha witnessed Patriarch Ebenezer declare, "It is a divine trial, not a sign to change our ways." Martha's inner transformation began quietly then, like water slowly eroding stone. Her face remained impassive as she assisted the midwife, but something fundamental shifted within. In her diary, found decades later, she wrote with trembling letters, "I saw the eyeless face of an innocent today and realized it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above nature's laws." Martha's world shattered completely on April 16, 1834, when her youngest sister, 9-year-old Sarah, was declared ready for the family pact. Sarah, a girl with a crystalline laugh and golden hair, was the only person Martha openly loved. The two shared a small room under the main house's roof, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, defying family rules that deemed female education unnecessary beyond domestic knowledge. That spring morning, Sarah was taken to the family chapel, where the patriarch announced her future marriage to their 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, known for his cruelty to animals and violent temper. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to watch her sister punished, her hair forcibly cut, followed by 3 days confined in the granary without proper water. On the 3rd day, when Martha was finally allowed to bring water, she found Sarah burning with fever, delirious about black angels with iron claws. For 72 uninterrupted hours, Martha applied cold compresses and prepared medicinal infusions, holding the small, warm hand in her own. At dawn on the 4th day, she felt Sarah's fingers relax. Without tears or outward mourning, Martha washed her sister's body with wild rose water, wrapped her in the white linen meant for her own wedding sheet, and placed a small cloth doll, a last secret gift for Sarah, beside her before burial. That night, alone under a canopy of stars, Martha took a silent oath before the simple grave. For every unshed tear, for every stifled scream, there would be a reckoning. The system upholding the Sullivan property was a web of mutually reinforcing authority. At its center, 63-year-old Ebenezer Sullivan ruled with an iron fist and distorted biblical rhetoric, justifying isolation and internal marriages. His firstborn, 25-year-old Jeremiah, administered physical punishments, having developed methods that left no visible marks, like using wet towels to discipline transgressors. Uncle Thaddeus, Ebenezer's younger brother, supervised finances, making semi-annual trips to sell the property's goods and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from distant villages to partially renew the family blood. Reverend Blackwood, not a relative but complicit for convenience, visited quarterly to officiate unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for his silence. The growing tension reached its breaking point during Ebenezer's 65th birthday celebration in October 1836. Before the entire gathered family, the patriarch announced, "To ensure the continuity of our purest lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood at the next full moon." Martha, then 19, watched her brother's face break into a smile as relatives applauded. That same night, listening behind a door, she heard Ebenezer reveal the detailed plan to Jeremiah: "You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children, born of our lineage's purest blood, will be raised under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I am gone." Martha understood then she had reached the point of no return. It was not just her future at stake, but generations yet unborn. On November 7, 1836, Martha was subjected to the purification ritual preceding all Sullivan marriages. Naked and bathed in herbs by 3 elder women of the family, she remained silent as they sang old songs from the British Isles. Her long brown hair was braided with white ribbon symbolizing purity, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions on marital duties, details that turned her stomach. Dressed in a white nightgown made for the occasion, she was led to the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah waited. The patriarch took her right hand and his son the left, lifting them overhead as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivans, shall remain among the Sullivans, and shall generate new Sullivans." The ceremony halted when Martha suddenly fainted, collapsing hard against the wooden floor. The family doctor, Thompson, an alcoholic whose medical license had been revoked years prior, diagnosed it as mere feminine nervousness and prescribed rest until the wedding day. During her supposed recovery, Martha was kept under constant watch in the room she once shared with Sarah. Through the narrow window, she observed the wedding preparations, the chapel decked with pine boughs, the new cabin being built for her and Jeremiah, relatives arriving from neighboring properties. Her once expressive face became an impassive mask. "The girl has lost her soul," remarked one aunt. "It is the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, Martha executed the plan she had silently crafted since Sarah's death. Using knowledge acquired over years of observation and secret study, she mingled a combination of sleep-inducing herbs into the celebration drinks. While the Sullivans drank and celebrated the union set for the next day, Martha remained sober, watching as guests grew heavy-eyed and slow. When the last, including her designated guards, fell into deep sleep, each element of her meticulously structured plan clicked into action. First, from a hiding place under a loose floorboard, she retrieved a small bag of gold coins collected over years of secretly selling medicinal herbs to outsiders. She then donned prepared men's clothes, cutting her long hair short with a knife kept sharp under her mattress. She gathered 5 children, all born with deformities from consanguineous unions and hidden in various corners of the property. With silent, precise movements, she led the children from the main house to the stable, where 2 horses stood ready. The date was no accident, she had chosen the new moon for maximum darkness. The countdown she had kept in her mind for months had reached 0. "Today we are born again," she whispered to the frightened children as she helped them mount. Back at the Sullivan property, wedding preparations peaked. Oil lanterns lit the path from the main house to the chapel, where a drunken Reverend Blackwood rehearsed the ceremony. In the bride's room, 3 aunts arranged the white dress over an empty bed, arguing over who would place the traditional family veil. In the kitchen, a whole pig roasted slowly, while women prepared bread and sweets for the 2-day feast tradition required. Meanwhile, miles away, Martha Sullivan carried out each phase with clockwork precision. In the dense forest shadows, she applied dark dyes, prepared days before from walnuts and charcoal, to the children's faces and her own for camouflage. 2 of the little ones, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were strapped to her with leather. The eldest, a 12-year-old boy who had never developed speech but understood instructions, firmly held the reins of the second horse bearing the other 2 children. The distant sounds of music and laughter faded, replaced by hoofbeats on soft forest soil and occasional owl hoots. As dawn's first light tinged the horizon, the small group reached the plan's first stage, a hunter's abandoned cabin, 15 miles from the Sullivan property, where Martha had secretly stocked supplies for months. The pre-arranged signal, 3 short whistles, confirmed they had reached the first safe point. In the early hours of November 12, 1836, Martha Sullivan executed her plan in meticulously timed steps. Phase 1, infiltrate the patriarch's quarters where family documents were kept. With movements learned from observing hunters, she retrieved birth certificates and the family record book documenting generations of consanguineous marriages. Phase 2, strategic isolation. She cut the alarm bell ropes and removed wheels from carts to hinder pursuit. Phase 3, liberation of the hidden children, 5 little ones kept in secret compartments due to visible deformities. For each adult who had participated in cruelties, Martha left a specific mark. For the uncle who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair upon his pillow. For cousin Herbert, intended for Sarah, a child's drawing the girl had made weeks before her death. Leaning over a sleeping Jeremiah, she whispered in his ear, "Sullivan blood ends here." In Patriarch Ebenezer's room, she left the record book open to the page documenting 23 children's births and premature deaths in 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written in the margin, "It was not God who created these monsters." When fire began consuming the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, Martha was already guiding the 5 children down a forest trail, leaving only silence behind. The exodus followed a precise script. First, the stop at the hunter's cabin to exchange horses marked with the Sullivan symbol for less identifiable mules. Then, splitting into 2 groups for lower visibility, they traveled secondary trails, avoiding main roads where news of their escape would spread. Martha had prearranged a meeting with Rebecca Thornton, a midwife and herbalist living on society's fringes who sympathized with her cause after treating Sullivan children. In Rebecca's simple home, Martha organized a makeshift ritual. She cut a lock from each child's hair, burned them along with the wedding dress she had secretly taken, mixed the ashes with soil, and planted a young oak in the enriched earth. "This tree marks one cycle's end and another's beginning," she explained to the wide-eyed children. The plan accounted for calculated resistance. Martha knew some children, conditioned to oppression, would fear the unknown. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding spot at Rebecca's, she softly sang old lullabies until the child slept in her arms. For the older boy who tried to flee back to the Sullivan property, she offered no orders, but a choice, the first true choice any Sullivan had ever received. When they finally departed, they formed a small column, Martha leading, each child carrying a single significant personal object, Rebecca at the rear. In the distance, smoke remained visible, a grey column against the November blue sky, marking where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic decay. News of the Sullivan event spread like wildfire. Harlan County's sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the isolated family's internal affairs, was forced to act when flames consumed part of the property. His official report, preserved in county archives, describes with bureaucratic language what he found: structures damaged by seemingly deliberate fire, several individuals in a comatose state from ingesting an unknown substance, disappearance of 1 adult female, MS, and 5 minors. Correspondence between local and state authorities reveals growing alarm. The Sullivan case represents a potential threat to social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended. By December 1836, records indicate 3 other isolated Appalachian properties with histories of close-kin marriages suffered similar events, children with deformities missing, compromising family documents mysteriously exposed. In February 1837, Kentucky's governor received a confidential report mentioning emergence of a Sullivan method, a term describing the systematic liberation of children from consanguineous unions and exposure of family records. The period press, limited by social conventions, only indirectly referred to disturbances in isolated communities and renewed authorities' interest in marital practices in mountainous regions. Among families keeping similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. Private documents reveal frantic correspondence: "We must disperse children immediately." Conversely, among marginalized communities and abolitionist groups, hopeful whispers circulated about the woman who frees the forgotten. The state's response to Martha's escape and subsequent liberation wave was swift and severe. In March 1837, Governor James Clark secretly authorized a special force of 6 experienced rangers led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of indigenous wars known for relentless efficiency. Using tracking techniques honed pursuing fugitive slaves, they followed the group's trail through 5 counties. A progressive siege strategy gradually reduced available hiding territory while agents infiltrating marginal communities traded rewards for information. The first capture came in April 1837, 2 children found in a Shaker community that had welcomed them unquestioningly. By June, the siege tightened when a traveling merchant, tempted by a substantial reward, revealed he had ferried a short-haired young woman with 3 deformed children across the Ohio River. The final betrayal came from an unexpected source. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered sanctuary in his rural church, gave up their location after authorities threatened to investigate his own questionable finances. The decisive confrontation occurred on August 17, 1837, in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati. Unofficial reports describe how Martha, realizing they were surrounded, organized the escape of the 3 remaining children through a pre-dug tunnel while she stayed to delay pursuers. Witnesses say when rangers broke down the door, they found her calmly seated at a table, Sullivan documents organized before her, a small empty poison bottle in her hand. Her last words, recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary, Sullivan blood now runs free in the world. You will never find them all. In the decades after Martha Sullivan's death, her story transformed from family scandal to regional legend. Isolated Appalachian communities developed a body of oral traditions around her figure. Hunters swore they saw a short-haired woman guiding children through forests on moonless nights. Midwives discreetly offered protection to newborns with deformities, citing a Martha's oath as justification. Families maintaining consanguineous marriage practices reported nocturnal visits from a female presence, leaving small cloth dolls like the one Martha placed in Sarah's coffin, a silent warning. Objects associated with her story gained near-mythic status. The Sullivan family record book, paradoxically spared from flames, passed through several hands before being anonymously donated to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1867, where it remains an important document on period marital practices. In isolated rural communities, folkloric songs preserved her memory in coded verses. The midnight lady takes the marked smalls when the moon hides and the watchmen fall. From 1870 onward, a significant decline in close-kin marriages occurred in mountainous regions, a phenomenon academic historians attribute to growing socio-economic integration, though local tradition credits the Sullivan effect. Discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, an unmarked mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border, became an annual tradition among families with histories of congenital defects. In stark contrast to official records minimizing her existence, popular memory turned Martha Sullivan into an enduring symbol of resistance against practices sacrificing innocent lives on the altar of twisted tradition. In certain isolated Appalachian communities, even today, when a child is born with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity, elders whisper, "This child has Martha's touch." If you have watched this far, you care about the stories that forever marked our nation. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here, so I can know you and see who truly cares about uncovering historical truth." Like this video if Martha Sullivan's story touched your heart. Share it so Martha Sullivan's memory is never forgotten.